Hey, you're about to learn something about the Roman Empire that you probably never knew, something you won't even find in most history textbooks. This fact may shock you because it could completely change the way you see the Roman Empire. One of the most valuable trade commodities in ancient Rome wasn't spices or silk, it was human urine. Small jars were placed all over the city, and people would relieve themselves in them. Once the jars were full, they were collected every day. Some workers even went door to door to gather urine. This practice was taken so seriously that there was even an entire profession dedicated to collecting it. Can you imagine that? Because human urine was used for something incredibly important. So what was this liquid used for? The truth is, it was used for almost everything. It was used in leather tanning, fabric bleaching, and even as fertilizer. But one of its most disturbing uses was for oral hygiene. Writing or not, this is absolutely true. The Romans even used urine as a mouthwash to whiten their teeth. As shocking as it sounds, the ammonia in urine is actually an effective cleaning agent. So scientifically, they weren't entirely wrong. The Roman poet Catullus even mocked one of his enemies by writing that the brightness of his teeth was proof of how much urine he used. But here's an even more fascinating fact. Emperor Vespasian officially imposed a tax on this valuable liquid. Can you believe that? When his son Titus complained, saying, "What a disgusting way to make money," Vespasian held the first tax payment under his son's nose and asked, "Does it smell?" When Titus replied, "No," Vespasian delivered the famous line, "But the money comes from urine." Just imagine that scene. How extraordinary is it? And that's how the famous saying, "money doesn't stink," became part of history. Now you know where that expression comes from. Writing. Entering a public toilet in ancient Rome was far more dangerous than you might think. The toilets were designed with long stone benches containing rows of holes placed side by side, with no partitions between them. Dozens of people sat next to each other at the same time, and privacy simply didn't exist. But believe it or not, that wasn't even the worst part. Beneath these toilets was a massive sewer system with poor ventilation. As waste decomposed, methane and hydrogen sulfide gases built up below. In some cases, these gases could ignite, causing real explosions. A Roman could literally be risking his life while simply using the toilet. And it gets even worse. Historical records mention insects and even scorpions climbing up from the sewers. The Romans were so uneasy about this that they painted protective gods and magical symbols on the walls of their toilets to ward off evil spirits. Imagine how unpleasant that must have been. On the other hand, Roman baths were one of the greatest sources of pride in the empire. They were places for socializing, relaxing, and even conducting business meetings. An ancient Roman tomb inscription summed it up perfectly. Baths, wine, and love ruin our bodies, but they are what make life worth living. Here's another surprising fact about Rome. Although these enormous bathhouses were impressive, the water was typically changed only once a day. Unlike modern swimming pools, they had no advanced filtration systems, even though some water circulation did exist. This meant that the sweat, body oils, dirt, and even blood from open wounds of hundreds of people remained in the same water for hours, sometimes all day. Sick people also bathed in these pools because Roman physicians prescribed hot baths as a remedy for almost every illness. It was entirely possible to find yourself sharing the same water with someone who had a cough, diarrhea, or an open wound. It's a contradiction. Despite these hygiene issues, Roman baths were still a remarkable achievement for their time. Archaeologists have discovered another surprising fact after studying Roman human remains. Despite the widespread use of toilets and public baths, intestinal parasites were no less common than they had been during the Iron Age, even though you would expect the opposite. According to some researchers, one major reason was another unpleasant practice. Human waste was often spread directly onto farmland as fertilizer before it had been properly composted. As a result, parasite eggs contaminated vegetables, which were then eaten by people, creating a vicious cycle of reinfection. In many ways, Rome became trapped in a cycle fueled by its own waste, and without proper sanitation measures, these problems were almost unavoidable. If we take a closer look at Roman medicine, the picture isn't exactly pleasant. In fact, some of it is enough to turn your stomach, so be prepared. The naturalist Pliny the Elder seriously claimed that dried camel brain mixed with vinegar could cure epilepsy, while the ashes of burned camel dung could make hair curly. Strange medical advice, to say the least. And it wasn't just camel dung. Goat dung was also considered beneficial for certain treatments. But the most disturbing Roman remedy involved gladiators. Many Romans believed that gladiators' blood had healing powers. I won't go too deeply into that topic here, but if you'd like to hear the full story, let me know in the comments and I'll make a separate video about it. Walking through the streets of ancient Rome was unlike anything you could experience in a modern city. The things you might witness in a single day, there would be enough for an entire year somewhere else. Surprisingly, Rome's famous sewer system wasn't originally designed to carry away human waste. It was mainly built to drain rainwater from the streets. That meant food scraps, animal carcasses, and other filth were often left lying in the streets. In some neighborhoods, so much garbage piled up that stone stepping blocks had to be placed so people could walk across without stepping directly into it. At night, things became even more dangerous. Instead of visiting public toilets, many Romans used chamber pots inside their homes. In the morning, the contents were either emptied into a public latrine or simply thrown out of the window onto the street below. Not exactly what you'd expect from the mighty Roman Empire. Roman legal records even contain real court cases involving people who were injured or killed by falling chamber pots. So, if you were walking through the streets of ancient Rome, you didn't just have to watch where you stepped, you also had to watch what might be falling from above. Writing. A custom in ancient Rome called ius osculi, or the right to kiss. Under this tradition, a married woman was expected to kiss not only her husband, but also his male relatives, his brothers, cousins, and other close family members on the lips. As strange as it sounds today, it was an accepted social custom. But this wasn't a romantic gesture at all. In reality, it functioned as a kind of ancient alcohol test. The purpose was to check whether a woman had been drinking wine by smelling her breath. At the time, women were generally forbidden from drinking wine, and if a husband detected the smell of alcohol, it could be treated as evidence of adultery. A woman could be divorced, and in some of the earliest Roman traditions, even face severe punishment, including confinement or starvation. But why did Emperor Tiberius ban public kissing? There are two main theories, and both are fascinating. The first is the health theory. Some historians believe that this compulsory kissing tradition helped spread a contagious facial skin disease, referred to in ancient sources as mentagra, which caused disfiguring lesions, especially among the Roman elite. In response, Emperor Tiberius reportedly banned kissing during official ceremonies between AD 14 and 37 in an effort to stop the disease from spreading. Roman doctors attempted to treat the lesions by burning them with hot irons, but as you can imagine, this usually left patients with even worse scars. As a result, fewer and fewer people were willing to undergo the treatment. Because of this, some historians jokingly describe Tiberius's order as the world's first recorded example of social distancing. Without his intervention, the custom might have contributed to much larger outbreaks. The second is the personality theory. According to the Roman historian Suetonius, the story was actually much less dramatic. He wrote that Tiberius became tired of people bothering him throughout the New Year celebrations by bringing gifts and greeting him with ceremonial kisses. Tiberius had a habit of personally repaying gifts with ones worth 4 times as much, but he eventually grew frustrated with the constant interruptions. So he issued a decree ending both the New Year's gift-giving tradition and the accompanying public kissing after the calends of January. In this interpretation, the ban had little to do with public health and much more to do with the emperor's reserved personality and his desire to avoid endless social obligations. Many historians therefore see the kissing ban not as a medical precaution, but as another example of Tiberius's famously private and withdrawn character. So, which theory do you think is the more convincing one? So after learning all of this, how should we really look at the Roman Empire? The truth is, what set Rome apart from other ancient cities wasn't that it was dirtier, it was that it was far larger and far more crowded, which made these problems much more visible. Even 19th century London struggled with many of the same sanitation issues. Rather than judging Rome only by its flaws, it's worth remembering that it was one of the first great civilizations to confront urban challenges on such a massive scale, building aqueducts, sewer systems, and public bathhouses that were centuries ahead of their time. Still, it's hard not to wonder why they focused so much on managing rainwater, while human waste remained such a serious problem. Perhaps that's the greatest irony of all. Rome created engineering masterpieces for cleanliness that still inspire us today, yet it did so without understanding germs or bacteria. It proved that magnificence and filth, luxury and disease could exist side by side in the very same streets. You could even argue that they often solved secondary problems before addressing the most important ones. So the next time you watch a movie about ancient Rome or admire a polished marble statue in a museum, remember what was hidden beneath that glorious image. Togas washed with urine, shared toilet sponges, and toilets that could literally explode. History isn't nearly as clean or as innocent as we often imagine.